This is You've Already Been Hacked, recorded on
10 April 2026. Welcome back to You've Already Been Hacked. This week, 4 new stories, and all of them are not good. And one's even a follow-up from something we covered last week. Cowboy, how are you doing on this fantastic Friday?
I'm great. I took the time to watch Artemis 2 and Orion capsule safely return to Earth. I counted how many times, or I tried to count how many times the broadcaster said the erection of the front door. I'm sure he has a side bet going with somebody because it was at least 20. So good on him. Appreciate that. How was your week?
It was great. I noticed on Artemis that Outlook wasn't working. I noticed that they had no care for the astronauts' security by showing them typing their pins into their devices multiple times. I noticed that they also use VLC as their video player while they're up there on their tablet devices on Artemis. So that I thought was all really interesting, just from a layman's look at some of the tech that they're using inside the capsule while they're there. I'm glad that you and
It
I
is.
both believe that they actually went and came back, as opposed to production studio in somebody's backyard.
That's right. And it proves that the Earth is flat because we could only see one side of it. So,
So true.
and how fitting given the Cowboy just had an article published where I was discussing cybersecurity in cislunar. So, and they spoke to it and talked about the 2028 mission to the moon to begin building our base up there. So, just given the little things that we saw, like, film me while I type my pin in, hopefully they're thinking a lot more about cybersecurity on the moon, because the catastrophic events you could have from a cyber incident on a moon base is a whole new level of
Oh,
scary.
it is. Yeah, in San Antonio, where I film my portion of the digital SOC, there is the tech port uh, at
Hmm.
here in San Antonio, and they have at tech port an entire uh, exhibit on not lunar colonization, but how they're gonna mine resources from lunar rocks and the lava tubes, and it's very fascinating. So I look forward to Artemis 37 getting there and doing all that stuff for us whenever that finally decides to get the budget to have that happen. All
Exciting
right.
times.
All right. With that, let's get to the cybersecurity news of the week. In our top story, the new LucidRook malware has been used to target attacks on NGOs and universities. This new sophisticated malware campaign, dubbed LucidRook, has emerged, targeting non-governmental organizations and universities across Taiwan with alarming precision. What makes this attack particularly concerning is its use of LUA, a scripting language. I'm sure there's a way to say that, Cowboy. A scripting language rarely seen in modern malware operations. The attacks are employing spear phishing campaigns that deliver the malicious payload through carefully crafted emails designed to appear legitimate to their targets. The Lua, I'm going to go Lua. Lua-based architecture represents a significant evolution in malware design. Unlike traditional compiled executables, Lua scripts can be more difficult to detect by signature-based antivirus systems and can be easily modified to evade detection. The attackers appear to be focusing on organizations that handle sensitive research data, donor information, and potentially classified materials, making these NGOs and universities attractive targets for state-sponsored actors or organized cyber criminal groups. The campaign's sophistication suggests a well-funded operation with deep knowledge of both the target landscape and technical implementation. By using Lua, the attackers gain flexibility in their operations while reducing the likelihood of detection by security tools that primarily scan for traditional malware signatures. That's pretty concerning overall. Why this matters is, one, it's showing that script-based malware reconnaissance is not only possible, but can be highly effective. It's showing that target selection reveals strategic intent. The focus On the NGOs and universities, just the attackers are either after specific intelligence research data, intellectual property, or potentially sensitive communications. Taiwan always being the flashpoint du jour of geopolitics, although we have plenty of flashpoints on the planet right now, so take your pick. Lua's legitimate use complicates defense, since Lua is a legitimate programming language used by many enterprise applications, including game development and embedded systems. Distinguishing between benign and malicious scripts requires deep contextual analysis. And again, spear phishing is just getting better and better. And I would say that LLMs are the reason that it's finally getting far more effective than it has been in years past. So, what can or should you be doing about this right now? Well, implement application whitelisting that specifically controls script execution. Assume you are a target if you are an NGO or a research organization, and implement enhanced security controls accordingly. Conduct security awareness training specifically focused on spear phishing recognition. Coordinate with research offices to identify high value data that requires additional protection. And then you should understand that your organization's research or mission may make it a target regardless of your size. Cowboy?
Yeah, so they have attributed this to UAT 10362, which is really just how Cisco enumerates the cluster of activity around LucidRock. But it does have the target. Sorry, let me start over. Woo!
It is Friday.
It has geofencing within the malware, right? So it checks if the target system is set to traditional Chinese to ensure the malware is only executing on intended geographic areas.
Interesting.
So, that's indicators right there of who might be around that. It's also using DLL side loading to execute the malware, which helps evade detection. And it actually will uses the dropper LucidPawn, which leverages a fake antivirus executable, which impersonates a Trend Micro worry-free business security services executable to, again, help appear more legitimate. And the malicious DLL, it side loads, mimics something that looks like Microsoft Edge. So a lot of sophistication around its evasion techniques went on the system, and what not to infect, if you will. And so, yeah, I mean,
So what do you
stealing
think?
IP
Do you think state sponsored, or do you think cyber criminal organization?
No, it's got to be state sponsored when you look at what they're going after, right? They're targeting think tanks, they're targeting Taiwanese government type stuff. And believe it or not, for those that don't track, I mean, targeting universities, especially universities that regularly work with the government of a country, the federal government of a country, are very often targeted, and a lot because they don't have the cybersecurity rigor that more traditional company has. So everything here smells like state sponsored.
Yeah, I would agree. 100% agree with that. Yeah, I mean, it could also be, if it is state sponsored, right? They're definitely going after a specific niche right now, but if the campaign is successful there, if not patched globally, which, as you and I both know, and as our audience knows, probably ain't going to happen for a little while, because why would anybody patch things immediately? Could be successful elsewhere too, which could be concerning. They might have to change the language pack thing that they're doing, but otherwise, if it's working, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. In our next story, the Florida AG announces investigation into OpenAI over a shooting that allegedly used ChatGPT to plan the attack. In an unprecedented legal development, the Florida Attorney General has launched a formal investigation into OpenAI following a deadly shooting at the Florida State University, where ChatGPT allegedly assisted in planning the attack. The incident, which occurred in April 2025 and resulted in 2 deaths and 5 injuries, has now triggered state-level examination of the AI company liability for how their systems may be misused by bad actors. The investigation centers on allegations that OpenAI safety measures were insufficient to prevent ChatGPT from providing actionable information that facilitated the attack. This case raises fundamental questions about the responsibility of AI developers when their systems are used for malicious purposes. Unlike traditional software companies, AI models can generate novel content and advice that wasn't explicitly programmed, creating a gray area around liability and accountability. The Florida investigation could establish important legal precedents that affect not just OpenAI, but the entire artificial intelligence industry. We have a bunch of notes here, but I'm going to skip them, and I think I'm going to soapbox on this one. So I apologize to our listeners, and Cowboy, to you too. But I appreciate what the Florida Attorney General's office is doing. I think that the right thing is to look into how this happened and what could be done to mitigate it from happening again. I think that the idea of liability is important. I understand that. I think that guardrailing is super important in AI. And then let's just talk about the elephant in the room that none of this is going to prevent, fix, or obliterate, which is unrestricted open source models. You're not going to get rid of them. You're not going to stop them. You're not going to change the fact that a person can ask an uncensored model for what is being allegedly asked here and get probably the unfortunate assistance that they're looking for. So I don't know that what they're going to do is going to actually prevent this. And even if legislation came about that said if you produce an open source model, it must be shipped with guardrails, that's great. It's open source. How do you think they're becoming unrestricted? There are people that download them and break the guardrails and then make them available on the interwebs for other people to get. So I'll step off my soapbox now, Cowboy. Over to you.
Oh, you're right. I mean, same reason people jailbreak iPhones, right? You're not supposed to. It's quasi illegal, but people do it anyway. So it is, they're doing what they can to make sure at least the big companies who have the more powerful AI
Sure.
systems, if you will, right, have accountability for their systems. And yeah, if you've ever used ChatGPT or something else, it's inherently supportive of almost any ethic or field of view you take toward it. It wants to please you. Psychologists call it AI psychosis, where again your delusions are reinforced, encouraged, deepened because it wants to please you. Essentially, it always wants to be like, oh, you could. It doesn't matter what you tell it. It'll be like, oh yeah, you're right. That probably is bad, right? It just kind of wants to be there for you. And so, but you're right. That locks down, you know, 5% or whatever of all these models,
It
right?
locks down the frontier models and, like you said, the big companies, but it doesn't lock
Yeah.
down the dearth of open source models that exist today that are fairly capable in many things. I won't say in everything, but I would think in the scenario that we discussed and trying to be careful with the censorship of platforms as we discuss it. I would think that many open source models, unfortunately, could accomplish this task in planning. I think that they would be more than capable. Not all of them, but many of them. So I don't know that this solves anything other than putting blame on uh, a large company, which rightfully so. If their product was used to do this, absolutely. But I don't think it solves the systemic problem, which that Pandora's box has been opened, so I don't know what you do there. That's my take on it.
At the end of the day, you're going to make them have to work a little bit harder to write like, oh, I can't just go to ChatGPT and get what I need. Now I at least have to figure out how to, download that AI assistant, set up the LLM, get it running properly, and then I can ask it all the stupid, horrific things I want to, right? Like that's what it's doing. It's creating more steps, and maybe it will stop some people who are not
Sure.
inclined to understand how to do that. Best case scenario.
Yes. Yeah. I think that's probably a fair take. Okay, in our next story, healthcare IT solutions provider Chipsoft hit by a ransomware attack. The Dutch healthcare software vendor Chipsoft has fallen victim to a ransomware attack that forced the company to take its website and digital services offline for patients and healthcare providers. The attack disrupted critical healthcare infrastructure, affecting hospitals and medical. This sounds like something we said for somebody else just a couple weeks ago, but this is a different company, and again in the medical sector and medical facilities that rely on Chipsoft software for patient management, scheduling, and clinical operations. Chipsoft serves as a foundational technology provider for numerous healthcare organizations across the Netherlands and potentially other European markets. When their systems went offline, hospitals faced immediate operational challenges. Patient records became inaccessible, appointment scheduling systems failed, and clinical workflows were disrupted. This type of supply chain attack represents one of the most dangerous forms of ransomware because it doesn't just affect a single organization, but cascades through an entire ecosystem of dependent services. The company's decision to take their systems offline rather than pay the ransom suggests they may have had backup capabilities or are attempting to avoid funding criminal operations. However, the extended downtime still causes significant harm to the healthcare delivery to patients and potentially delaying treatments, affecting the quality of care and creating operational chaos for medical staff who must revert to manual processes. Why does this matter? Well, the healthcare industry is an exceptionally lucrative target. The supply chain for the healthcare industry is riddled with security holes, and it is going to be a continued problem. Critical infrastructure independence is not fully there. Modern healthcare systems rely heavily on digital systems, making it uniquely vulnerable. Ransomware targeting is evolving. Attackers are increasingly targeting infrastructure providers rather than the end users because it maximizes the disruption and increases the pressure to pay the ransom. What can or should you be doing right now? Well, if you're in the healthcare technology industry or in healthcare organization, map the technology supply chain and identify single points of failure in critical systems. Implement supply chain security controls that protect against attacks on your own infrastructure. If you're a security team in healthcare, conduct regular table talk exercises focused on technology supply chain disruption. I bet you that's a place that's probably not looked at as hard as it needs to be. Um, and if you're in executive leadership, develop relationships with legal counsel experienced in healthcare security incidents because you're going to need them. Cowboy?
To quote an opening line from one of my favorite video games growing up, 1993 Super Nintendo game, The Secret of Mana.
Oh,
Time flows like a river and history repeats. As
over
you
and
say, we've
over.
talked about this. Yes. Um, eh, I think you said it in the thing, but like Chipsoft is one of the larger um, electronic health record systems in the Netherlands, and its flagship
Yeah.
platform HIX was disconnected as part of this, as well as several other portals, including their mobile portal. So, yeah, when you think about the disruption that could cause is staggering across, again, healthcare, a arguably critical infrastructure and critical service, right, to the people. Even the smallest outages there can just have
Yeah.
massive cascading effects. So um, yeah, it does sound like they had some good backups in place, and maybe it wasn't down too bad, but it just continues to chip away at brand. It chips away at trust, in the system that people are gonna be taken care of, but also kind of what are you gonna do, right? Like if you're a user of these systems and it gets taken offline, the options to pivot are minimal,
Minimal.
especially in a smaller country,
Yeah.
right?
Well, even in larger,
So
like, I think the healthcare industry, while there's a level of multiple provider, right? At the end stage, the infrastructure they use, I would say, I don't want to say is limited. That might be the wrong word, but I'm sure has its own niche of providers, and there probably are not a terrible amount of them that are doing some of the things here that were disrupted, right?
yes,
So if it could have a very, I mean, luckily, and I'm saying that with a very big grain of salt, but luckily it was only in the Netherlands and not in a country that was significantly larger, because I think it could have been even more of a cascading problem. Yeah.
Yeah. Hopefully, none of our fellow CTF friends there were impacted, or if they were, it
Yes.
was minimal.
Yes. In our next story, a follow-up, I believe, from last week. uh, After the data breach, the $10 billion valued startup Mercor is having a rough month. Mercor, an AI-powered recruiting startup valued at approximately 10 billion, is facing significant business consequences following a major data breach that exposed sensitive information about job candidates and hiring companies. The incident has triggered lawsuits from affected parties and reportedly caused several big name customers to terminate their relationships with the company. This case illustrates how a single security incident can rapidly escalate into an existential business threat for even well funded startups. The breach appears to have compromised personal information, including resumes, contact details, and potentially sensitive hiring data that companies use to evaluate candidates. The timing is particularly damaging for Mercor, which had positioned itself as a leader in AI driven recruiting technology. The company's valuation relied heavily on investor confidence in its technology and business model. A major security breach directly challenges that confidence and raises questions about the company's technical maturity and operational readiness, despite its impressive funding and valuation. Well, this matters because valuation versus security maturity is a thing. High valuation doesn't necessarily reflect security capabilities. Startups focused on rapid growth and fundraising may underinvest in security infrastructure until it's too late. We're not saying that Mercor did that, but it is something to consider here, and it is always a trade-off. In cybersecurity as an industry, it is always a trade-off on what leadership is willing to spend on it. So just take that for what that's worth. Customer trust is its own form of currency. In B2B and platform businesses, trust is a primary product feature. Once compromised through a security incident, that trust is extremely difficult to rebuild regardless of technical remediation. AI companies handle particularly sensitive data, including personal information, behavioral patterns, and potentially proprietary algorithms. Breaches at these companies have unique implications beyond traditional data exposure. So, what could or should you be doing? Well, if you're a startup founder or an executive, might I suggest that you treat security as a core product feature and not an afterthought or a compliance requirement. If you're an investor or a board member, you should be asking specific questions about security architecture, incident history, and team capabilities. If you're a customer of these platforms, maintain your own backups and data copies rather than relying solely on a third party. If you're a security team professional at one of these companies, build security programs that scale with the business growth, not just technical infrastructure. And if you're a job seeker using these platforms, be cautious about sharing sensitive personal information on recruiting platforms at large. Just remember, once they have it, they have it. And even if they say they got rid of it, it's still on somebody's computer somewhere, probably. Cowboy?
Yeah, so the a hacker group has claimed that they got 4 terabytes of stolen data just from Mercor systems.
Crazy.
Along with what you had already said, current employer data, source code, and API keys were also stolen. This was due to malware that resided within the Light LLM tool that Mercor was using as part of its backend. And the malware slipped through a dependency, which basically means the open source software that Light LLM relied upon. The malware got through, and that's how it got in, and stole login credentials of everything.
Ugh.
And with those credentials, it gained access to more open source packages, harvested more account credentials, and so on and so on. A famed AI researcher, Andrew Carpathy, uh, actually said he thinks the malware was vibe coded because while effective, I guess the malware code was just really, really sloppy. So shout out to vibe coding that we definitely covered last week.
You know, I don't know. I would have to see it to say if it was sloppy. Some of my experience with vibe coding, I think that the structure can be far better than what I've seen in some production level code from other companies. So I'll take his word for it. I haven't looked into the code on that one, but yeah, sure. I'll buy that.
I thought it was worth mentioning just since we were just talking about vibe coding.
Yes, yes. Hold on. What else you got for us, Cowboy?
Eh, Going back to the space thing, like so excited for we have not gotten to see that in our lifetime, right? The last one was in what 69, 72, something like that.
No, we only got the space
So
shuttle during our lifetime.
predates before us, yeah. So, but I'll tell you, my OCO brain started going off while I was kind of waiting for them to come in and begin descending through orbit and stuff. I was just like, oh gosh, what a terrible time for a cyber attack, right? Whether it's while they're coming down or a supply chain thing that goes off at the worst time because there's no margin for error there. You want to talk about
Yeah.
a devastating cyber attack that could would be terrible. And I'm like, stop thinking like this. Not,
Well, so all right, so
but
I have questions, right? Like, why are we using Microsoft Outlook inside of a space vehicle at all? Like, does that mean that all of their tablets were They had to be Microsoft tablets. They had to be Windows based. Why are we using Windows at all in such a critical system? I'm sorry. Like, Microsoft, you make a product, but let's just say that Windows 11 maybe not has been the most stable of operating systems that you have made,
Mhm.
or with everything that's been added into it, it's added a level of complexity that maybe we don't need on a spacecraft. Just putting that out there. There are definitely other base systems that are a little, dare I say, leaner and maybe would be more reliable in that type of environment. It's just throwing that out there as a maybe, perhaps.
Yeah, and you
Qualifier,
look,
qualifier.
the administrator of NASA was even touting how like they had just signed an MOU with an Italian agency, space agency, somebody in Italy, and I was like, that's really cool, and it just made me think about the discussion about cybersecurity on cislunar, and like if you have 20 countries all building parts of this collective thing, I sure hope a cybersecurity, standard is being put in place, right, to do all the steps you need to do, all the zero trust things, everything. Because again, you get malware on the heater unit on cislunar, and you don't have long to fix that,
Nope.
right, before that turns catastrophic. And that goes for so many critical systems on cislunar. So I sure hope they are thinking about that.
Well, so here's where I'm concerned also with the tablets, right? Just on Artemis 2, right? They obviously had a level of wireless capability on the platform.
Mm.
That means that those tablets were communicating over the Artemis communication platform, whatever that is, right? Which means that a sophisticated enough adversary could jump the air gap there. That to me is highly concerning. Just the
Yeah, I'm
idea
sure
of
they
it is
didn't
concerning.
have. Yeah, I'm sure they didn't have their own downlink just for email, right?
Right, right.
Right.
Like,
And
there
scary to
there
think
there
about
there are
what else was it
environments
connected to.
there are environments, right? And I'm gonna walk a very careful line here, Cowboy, and you'll understand
Mm.
exactly why. There are environments where you have air gap systems. There are environments that have bifurcated systems. There are environments that have system high type environments that are walled off from the interwebs, and then there's system low type environments that you have internet access. I would love to believe that's what they did on Artemis. I don't know. I don't have the background. So if anyone from NASA or anyone that's worked on a space vehicle has some and wants to make a comment, please do, or reach out to us. Be happy to take that information. But given the limited amount of size and space that they have on the vehicle itself, I would doubt that they had bifurcated systems that were systemically separated. So that to me is very concerning. Because Windows as a platform, love it, hate it, use it, don't, does have the ability to be compromised. Well-known ability to be compromised. So that in itself is a concern for me when it comes to sending people up into space. Cowboy.
I can see some people sitting there and going, who would want to target the spacecraft, right? Which is the ultimate fail move that you hear so often. Like, the answer is hopefully nobody, but there's evil people. Somebody might. Don't
Right.
take that chance.
Right.
Don't take that chance. All right, to close up, a shout out to LucidRook. The Rook moves quietly across the board, and so does the malware across your network. I'm Cyber Cowboy. Stay frosty, everybody.
And I'm the professor of CyberRisk. That's all the news for this week, and we'll talk again soon.
If you like this podcast, share it with your colleagues and friends. Your support is how we are able to continue to make this content. Thank you.